Okay, great, we're recording. So welcome to William Powell, Director of Market Insight and Strategic Partnerships from Ivy Exec. This is a lunch and learn where organisations designed to help you with your research work, talk about what they can offer, and crucially also offer ICG members a fantastic discount. So hope you find this really interesting, and any questions, please send them to William at the end. He'll leave his email address or direct them to me and I'll pass them on. Over to William.
Wonderful, and thank you, Lucy. Thank you all for letting us come and crash your lunch today. So as Lucy mentioned, my name is William Powell, and I am the Director of Market Insights and Strategic Partnerships here at Ivy Exec. So I know this is a presentation, but as Lucy mentioned, and I'm sure for any of you I've had the pleasure of working with and partnering up with in the past, you might know very well that I like to keep things very informal, so I will do my best to keep an eye out on that chat. If you have any burning questions, feel free to throw them in there, and like she mentioned, we can probably tackle them at the end. But before we get into it here, I also wanted to introduce my colleague, Nick, as he works pretty directly with all of our consulting partners, so I'll give him a chance to introduce himself.
Thank you, William. Yeah, I nailed it right on the head. So I am an associate within the consulting vertical at Ivy Exec. So as William mentioned, I work primarily with our consulting partners as well as market research firms as well on their active projects or any of their research projects that they're looking to take on. So looking forward to meeting all of you.
Awesome. And I'm sure some of you might be confused, or if you had thought that that our colleague Robin was presenting today, he has actually moved to the client side, but he did play a big role in helping collaborate with us and come up with sort of these talking points today. So in order to pay a bit of homage to him and his efforts, I've included a short little intro of a recorded clip that I will start for you now.
More about that. We are an expert network of more than 2.1 million members. It is global. We're very proud to say that we have more than 800,000 women in business in our network, which stands them out among the expert networks. And if you look at our members, they are highly educated and come with a lot of experience, which is great when you're in the expert network business. Taking us to the next slide, we really show what we hone in on at Ivy Exec. We focus on the top level of the pyramid, of the insights pyramid, or the expertise pyramid, if you will. We take a look at the type of profiles who are on a manager level and above, or even further up. So when we look at our membership demographics, we actually have around 80% of our membership at director level and above. So directors, VPs, C-suite, owners, partners, founders, board members, whoever might be on a very type of senior level. Those are the ones that are attracted to Ivy Exec for various reasons, and those are the type of experts that we then help research firms reach.
So, as Robin had kind of alluded to, since 2012, Ivy Exec has recruited for thousands of market research projects with hundreds of different clients across the globe as our team and community has grown. Our bread and butter is really the recruiting piece of market research engagements. And so more specifically, we really specialize in the qualitative research. That's where we can use and leverage our senior B2B healthcare and high net worth community of about 2.5 million global members to connect our partners to some extremely or traditionally hard to reach audiences. So as you can see from the lovely infographic here, our members are truly the decision-making types, with over 80%, as Robin mentioned, actively residing in director level or above role. And before you think that this might be the beginning of a lengthy sales pitch, we'll get into why our members join Ivy Exec a little bit later in the presentation and what makes us unique. But I wanted to introduce the three main topics that we'll be covering during this presentation, and I hope we're enticing enough to have you join today. So what we have learned from recruiting C-suites and these executive decision makers, there are three main takeaways that we're going to touch on, and they really relate to going after these senior level and C-suite audiences that are too often difficult to reach and can cause, a lot of hair loss during some of these really tough research engagements. The first of which is go where the executives go. As some of you might know all too well, executives aren't the types to be jumping to participate in market research engagements, and they're certainly not the types to jump at the opportunity to join a traditional panel. So as a result, we've learned that you need to get creative as to where you look to find and engage or recruit these high-level respondents. The second of these is pick a practical methodology. We all know how busy executives can be on a daily basis. So it's vital that we keep in mind what methodologies best fit the time restrictions and the personality of the target executives we want to participate in our studies, of course, in combination with the goal of the research. And lastly, the third point for today is money isn't everything. Simply put, you aren't always going to persuade the executives that you want for your market research engagements solely because of, you know, the traditional monetary reward or incentive or honorarium, whichever word you like to use. So you have to provide other options and really create the value for these executives to take part in your research. So to provide a bit of a context, I wanted to introduce a case study on a project that came from an independent consulting partner of ours that we'll aim to kind of touch and follow throughout the presentation. But for context, this research partner came to Ivy Exec and asked us to help conduct a project on behalf of a large tech company who specializes in internet and social media services. So the end client was looking to speak with high-level and really C-suite decision makers when it came to ad purchasing. Specifically, they asked us to secure advertising decision makers at a variety of company sizes, ranging all the way from the big six, all the way down to smaller independent agencies. And it was really important that each one of these respondents was able to provide insights into not only the process, but really the general journey as it relates to the spending budget for online advertisements. And this partner in particular, of course, they had gone to other recruiting partners in the past because this was a reoccurring project for them, but naturally, they had a bit of an unbearable time trying to secure these high-level respondents, especially with these specific insights who had the right experience dealing with online ad spending. So going into this recruit, our project management team understood the difficulty of the engagement. We realized that we had to use a combination of recruitment methods, some more unorthodox than others. And this is something that we find across a lot of high-level recruits, which sort of takes us into our first key takeaway here. When recruiting for a project like this, we realize the audience we're after are not normally a part of your traditional panel, like I mentioned earlier. You really have to go to where these executives are spending their time. This is something that can be done across a variety of industries, and there's, of course, never just one solution, so we make sure to take a multifaceted approach and look at a few key resources that I have bulleted here. So the first of those is an industry association. I've listed a few of these examples here for organizations we've partnered with specifically to complete studies in the past. But of course, one in particular that we use for this case study is the American Association of Advertising. Who would have thought that's where a lot of these high-level decision makers in regards to online advertising might spend their time or be a part of. So partnering with associations is a great tool, and we find that many associations are actually very open to helping get in touch with the right respondents for studies, which you might not think they are, especially in the case when it's going to further the industry. It's going to provide more insights, or even simply put, increase that association's relevancy within and among the industry leaders. And the second point is there are, of course, other solutions such as the professional networks where Ivy Exec resides. And these could be something like the traditional LinkedIn or even more specialized communities such as Ivy Exec. It's important, however, to understand some of these networks may have limited abilities or complex costing structures, typically leading to potentially a pricey solution. So understanding that, we operate on a price per successful complete model. So we over-recruit for every engagement and really allow you to hand select the respondents that you'd like to speak with, and then only charge for those that successfully meet the goals of the study. We find that this approach is really helpful for our partners in negating any of the facts where we know this project is really tough. It might be our first time working with you. We don't want to pay a massive, one-time project management fee just to have you not get the full in or even close to it. So in combination with this understanding of the higher price involved with the senior level recruitment job, I figured it'd be helpful to mention that as Lucy mentioned earlier in the presentation, or earlier in the opening, any ICG member, we're excited to offer a 10% discount on our first engagement together, with a continual 5% discount carrying over to any project we're lucky enough to partner with you on afterwards. And then the third point here is that we really have the more old-fashioned but always reliable use of internal resources. These are research-specific associations and groups calling on an industry colleague from organizations such as the QRCA, the Insights Association, and of course, ICG, all with the goal of leveraging who you know and making use of those who maybe have experience with or could have even accomplished what you're trying to achieve before. So I always like to mention to any of our partners I run into that generally, if you knew everybody in the market research industry that you needed to, there couldn't be a project that you can't take on. So I know we get into it eventually, but I am actually going to pass things over to my colleague Nick here, so we can take a little bit of a deeper dive into how Ivy Exec accomplishes this first key takeaway.
Thank you, William. So Ivy Exec is unique in the fact that we pride ourselves on the fact that we're not viewing ourselves essentially as a panel, but instead more as an online community. So what's differentiating us is the fact that our members are not joining Ivy Exec to take surveys, but instead for the career advancement opportunities that we offer. And this is really what attracts our members. And those services are things that include professional development tools like career coaching, resume critiquing, career mapping, employer insights, as well as mentorship programs where C-level executives become mentors to other members of our community who may be in slightly earlier stages of their careers. Webinars hosted by subject matter experts across a variety of industries, keeping key opinion leaders and decision makers up to date on certain industry trends and rising technologies, as well as business school rankings. So making partnerships with the top MBA and EMBA programs where our members can further their education or even specialize in the fields they're already at the forefront of. So the unique relationship with our members gives us a massive benefit when it comes to recruiting them, because we have very personalized relationships with each member, allowing us to bypass the traditional gatekeepers and stand out among the ungodly amount of emails they all receive on a yearly basis. Additionally, we know relationships are built over time, so we emphasize the fact trying to maintain that same point of contact with the potential respondents so they feel more comfortable and responsive by knowing who they're working with. So this personal relationship with our members allows for much quicker recruitment times, transparent incentive requirements, and a higher rate of traction among a truly high quality audience who is traditionally known for being unavailable. So all of this is key because executives are, as we know, are always busy, which makes them far less open to participating in research when they only have a limited amount of free time, leading us to our second key takeaway, which I'm going to pass the ball right back to William, sorry.
No worries. And in case anybody's wondering, I do have a double name situation. So happy to call me William or Douglas. My middle name is Douglas, so I've gone by Doug my entire life.
That was a natural reaction. I apologize for that, but I figure we are about transparency here, so I figured I may as well bring it up.
Absolutely. So yeah, thank you, Nick. So moving on to sort of our second key takeaway in this presentation. Why is picking a practical methodology so important? I think we all understand at this point from how many times we've mentioned it that executives are busy, but let's take a look at how busy they really are. A study conducted by Bain and McKinsey found that on a weekly basis, executives spend a total of 1 day managing communications, 2 days jumping from meeting to meeting, and generally have enough emails to equate for a full day's worth of work or deliverables. So although I'm not an accountant like my father, after doing some quick math, this would mean that executives have only 1 day or 8 working hours during their week for downtime, or what I like to call the research hotspot. And just taking a look at some of these other findings, we start to get a sense of why it's so important to think about how certain methodologies are bound to have a greater impact and overall feasibility with these very senior level professionals. And as researchers as a whole, we have to keep all this in mind when building a study, right? So it's important to think about what methodologies fit with the lifestyles and the personalities of these executives and the target audiences that we're going after. And more importantly, how we can tailor maybe a traditional methodology to generate a more successful project. And so our second takeaway really focuses on how you want to make it easy, or as I'm sure none of you have heard this word before, make it feasible. So for example, if you're thinking about maybe conducting an online bulletin board, well, maybe we should make it flexible if we're going after a really high level or C-suite level audience. Running it for multiple days where there aren't very long activities, but shorter activities that can be accomplished in a variety or multiple sittings, or even at a single sitting. Maybe you push your client to opt for a phone IDI instead of an in-person meeting, which I know not many of us have done in the recent past, but that could allow executives to find the time to actually hop on the phone rather than finding the time to travel to and from an IDI or an appointment. And if being in person is important, maybe you can make it an on-site interview or be flexible in the meeting the respondent closer to their workplace or their home. These are all important to keep in mind, but it has to, of course, be in combination with the understanding that delays and cancellations will happen. And working with our members for about 3 years now, I pride myself on, as Nick mentioned, being transparent and honest and realistic on working with our partners to properly set expectations for the engagements that they may simply have an end client that's stuck on conducting, as I'm sure we've all been there before. So some quick examples are online focus groups. You may have people drop off if it's too long. So we would honestly probably suggest a 45-minute meeting rather than a 60, or a 60 rather than a 90. For in-person interviews or in-person focus groups, it may result in a no-show. So it's important to keep in mind at the forefront of the study that it's ideal to have that over-recruit, or maybe 1 to 2 over-recruits, depending on the size of the focus group. And then even conducting online surveys, which are typically very convenient, it may not play into the personality of an executive because it's not really going to stroke their ego enough or allow for the free-flowing thoughts and storytelling that most of them like to do. Where, as a qualitative approach, it might allow executives to tell more of their story, answering important questions and adding a bit more color to the information that we're after. So tying this back into our case study from before, after consulting with our research partner, we decided on a combination of remote telephone, web IDIs, and in-person IDIs as being the best approach. And we really decided on going with the combination of these two because we knew that these respondents would value a conversation and that this would also allow them to tell their story. As with nearly all qualitative research, this of course provided the moderator an opportunity to probe a bit more if they needed, that additional detail on a certain topic or felt that they needed just a bit more information out of a particular respondent. And we started the recruitment with options for both methodologies available. And if the respondent was open to both, we would, of course, allow the end client to determine whether they wanted to speak to the expert in person or remotely through the online or phone methodology. And using this combined approach of these two methodologies, Ivy Exec was able to successfully secure 40 respondents over a 4-week period. And 18 of these 40 respondents actually ended up conducting in-person interviews. It's also kind of helpful to mention that given the quality of the participants and their engagement levels, this particular partner of ours actually had their end client follow up with some of the respondents, and they wanted to conduct ethnographic studies after their original consultation. So now, of course, I did mention that cancellations can happen, but because we were sure to create the value for these executives to participate, we understand that the monetary incentive wasn't really everything to this caliber of a respondent, which takes us into sort of our final key takeaway here. Simply put, money to these high-level respondents is not everything. As I'm sure you might imagine, these executives value their time much more than a gift card. So it's vital to make sure that you create the value for the executives you're engaging for any research project. So using the Myers-Briggs theory, which I briefly mentioned before with stroking someone's ego, you really do want to stroke these executives' ego and articulate the actual impact that their time will have. So maybe you could even provide them with the findings or white papers from the study that they're going to be a part of. And of course, while money can certainly help for some folks, it certainly comes at a bit of a premium for this type of audience. So I did want to mention for this study in particular that our honorarium came out to around $400, but given the variety of audiences and industries that we recruit these senior and C-level executives from, honorariums can really range anywhere from $350 all the way up to $600 or more, of course, depending on what type of methodology we're going after. So the key takeaway from this third point would really be get creative. We found that many executives would prefer something like a donation to the charity of their choice, or exclusive or first access to the product and app that the study is being built or focused on, or even maybe in some use cases, an invitation to exclusive events and dinners, all of which we provided in some of our previous projects that we've taken on. So with our study specifically focused on these advertising decision makers, we used a couple of things to incentivize our members. Again, we knew that our typical monetary incentive wasn't going to be the only offer that would completely satisfy every participant's willingness to engage with us and participate in the project. So our team went back to our partner and asked for them to share their findings with the respondents, that white paper example I mentioned, because we knew because the respondents we're calling on were thought leaders in their industry, there would be a huge value in sharing these white papers and findings with them. Then I will be honest, I know this isn't a possibility for every project, but our partner for this one thankfully agreed so that we could include it as that value offering to every respondent and participant. And for those who chose the monetary incentive, we of course gave them the option, as we do for any of our projects, for them to either claim their incentive or donate it to a charity of their choice. So as I mentioned at the beginning, I am the Director of Business Development and Strategic Partnerships. And so I wanted to touch on that key last point. As we've grown and as I've been a member or a team member of Ivy Exec for about 3 years now, I've actually created and established an entire vertical here at Ivy Exec, which really revolves around forming long-term partnerships with specialized partners, often small businesses and consultants, who can help increase our overall value to our clients. So although we focused on Ivy Exec's core recruiting strengths with these senior and C-suite level audiences in this presentation, I am never one to leave a door unopened or a stone unturned. So of course you see my contact information here, and I'm sure Lucy will send it out afterwards. But I would love to explore however you think that we may potentially be able to partner, whether it's Ivy Exec helping you reach that extremely tough audience or get to the finish line of a project, or even if it's something that you think would help complement our recruiting efforts via something moderation, translation, analysis, etc., for any of the qualitative and quantitative engagements we take on. And with those extremely valued partnerships in mind, I will finally stop talking for a bit and kind of open up the floor to allow a couple of our existing partners here who are fellow members of yours at ICG to share a brief rundown on their experiences teaming up with Ivy Exec. And then, of course, leave the remaining time for any questions. And not to name any names, but
okay. Do you want me to start? Oh, okay, Nick, go on.
I was going to say, who do you want to go first?
Fire away.
Jeff, go ahead.
Okay, so I've been working with Ivy Exec probably for as long as William's been there, possibly a bit longer. And I first got introduced to them. I was working for another mid-sized, large-sized UK agency over here, and they were using Ivy Exec, and they were typically using them for that director level, VP level, across multiple specialisms and industry sectors. And so I thought, well, I'll give these guys a go. I had a big analyst company that needed some research doing around digital transformation, and I was after CIOs, CTOs, chief technology officers, CMOs, etc. That sort of within very large US enterprises. And so we had about 30 respondents to try and capture, and it was for a 1-hour interview, very, very detailed, very technology driven. And the guys came up trumps. I mean, not only did we get very quick recruits, but the quality of the recruits is also very high. And what I tend to do is I tend to double check on the respondents before I even do the interviewing. So, whether it's through LinkedIn or whatever. So what we found was very high quality recruits and also very sophisticated recruits as well. So, and then I did another project with them around the use of technology innovation labs. And again, a very difficult recruit, looking at those executives. It could be a director of engineering or it could be a VP of engineering, again, in a multitude of industries, and how they partner with academia and partner with IT technology companies. And so that was a smaller project, but again, we had the same sort of success rate. And it's not just about having the right recruits, but it was the pace of doing it, because the end client was very aggressive on the project timescales. And then I did an even harder project related to blockchain. And it was only after we got commissioned that the actual client said, well, we think the penetration levels are about 1%. And my heart dropped. And then I'm thinking, well, hopefully Ivy Exec can get me out of this hole that has just appeared. And it took a bit of time because it was a very, very difficult target audience. But not only did we get great recruits from major multinationals involved in blockchain consortium and real leaders in the industry, we avoided all those hundreds of consultants that tell you they know lots about blockchain. So we actually talked to the practitioners rather than the consultants. And for full disclosure, the other side of my relationship with Ivy is that I'm one of their preferred moderators. So again, anything technology or CXO type interviewing, then I tend to do quite a bit of work with them on that side as well. So, and that's my experience. If anyone's got any questions, feel free to fire away.
Thank you so much, Jeff. And
okay,
for the
good.
And if there's anything else you'd like to add, I will toss it to you, but please don't feel pressured.
No, it's fine. It's probably worth just giving it. It's a very similar case study, actually. So I suppose last year we did a couple of projects sequentially with an IT systems integrator. So I suppose we turned to Ivy because actually the respondent profiles that we were looking for was so narrow. So firstly, they had to be from mobile carriers, both in the UK and the US. And because of the way the market's consolidated, that essentially means you've got to work for one of 3 or 4 companies in the UK and one of 3 in the US. And secondly, they had a very, very specific role profiles and accountability. They were senior people. They were involved in the network rollout of 5G. And I suppose the third challenge, particularly for Ivy, is because I'd spent 13 years of my life working in a mobile phone company, is that they couldn't pull the wool out of my eyes in that I knew what respondent I was after. And I have to say the quality we got was amazing. I mean, to some extent, these were kind of needle in a haystack type people. And so we were able to share that back. And again, my client, the audience that we were presenting to, very senior, very technically oriented, and therefore we had to be having a conversation that wasn't at a high level, but the people genuinely had to know in quite significant detail technology infrastructure around 5G and where they were going. So we were really happy. I think, for me, what made it easier is also that to some extent, yes, it's an expensive recruit, but actually it's a full service. So these are the kind of things where you're not recruiting through a traditional screener. Generally, it's about role profiles, accountabilities. The guys would share a LinkedIn profile in advance. We'd review that. We'd reject some. We'd accept others. And then actually even just some of the basic admin about getting Zoom meetings set up and all that kind of stuff actually was all taken care of, which when you are doing a significant volume of depths back to back, actually to some extent, when you're a one-man band, it's quite nice to have somebody take all that load off as well. So we were really pleased with what we got. And I suppose most importantly, WWT, who was my client, who's a tech company, were absolutely delighted. So we did one phase, they commissioned a second one, and they're expecting to do more this year, which is great.
Thank you, Nick and Jeff, for the kind words. But yeah, I hopefully it's clear that here at Ivy Exec we put a massive emphasis on the quality of our, not only our members but anyone who we're going to submit for market research engagement. And again, to speak to that transparency, there are I think 3 main points in any successful market research project, specifically in what the client looks for. And they want things done quick, they want things done at the highest quality, and of course they want things done cheaply. And so I'll be the first to let you know honestly that I understand that Ivy Exec is a little bit of a higher priced recruitment solution. And so hopefully we're really excited to offer that 10% discount to all of the ICG members on that first engagement, and continually the 5% afterwards. But we are always happy to work with you, work with the research budget that there is, and hopefully order to partner and get the project done the right way. But with that being said, I appreciate everybody tuning in and listening. Of course, if there are any questions, let me check the chat here.
There are a couple, William, that have come in on the chat. Can you see them?
Fantastic. Yes, and apologies. I'm a bit new to GoToMeeting. So Jeff, sharing a bit about your capabilities outside of Heartland, USA and Canada. Yeah, so we are a global community of 2.5 million members. I would say, again, sticking to transparency, our highest or most representative markets from our membership are going to be North America, but really the EU5. So our top 2 markets in general are the US and UK, which is why we've seen so many relationships built over the last couple of years, specifically within the UK. And then I think it's helpful to mention that we have an entire team that is, we like to call the custom recruitment team. And so they use the same vetting measures that we have for any of our internal members when they join Ivy Exec. And they go out and use some very creative, as we touched on a few in the presentation, creative recruiting techniques and unorthodox techniques to find the right respondents for these really tough and hard to reach audiences. Maybe somebody who there just simply aren't many of these people exist. One of our most famous cases that I guess I like to mention is that we had to find engineers who used to work at NASA, and they had to work with a specific size of bolts as it applied to the aerodynamics space and spacecraft. I mean, it was a far out recruit and actually happened before I had even joined Ivy Exec, but it just speaks to our team's ability to go out and really hone in on, is this even feasible? Can we even go after these folks? Should this be a best effort? But we do have the ability to go outside of North America in terms of geography, and the EU5 would be our greatest markets with a little bit of combination of India, but APAC is generally very tough for us. And then Jane, do you cover the healthcare sector? And if so, any guidelines? Reaching practitioners in a pandemic. So that is a really tough question. I'm not sure I'm going to have an exact answer, but I will try. So in general, we do the variety of B2B recruits across any industry typically. And then our other strong suits are high net worth consumers and healthcare professionals. So these high level healthcare professionals, chief nursing officers. Right now I'm doing a study involving formulary development in the rheumatology space. And so in terms of guidelines for reaching practitioners, it's really about being patient. It's about catching them at the right time. And so we actually, we've developed sort of a concept around when to reach out to these professionals, and specifically the healthcare folks. We see the greatest level of traction with our members by reaching out to them a little bit before that 9 a.m. local time mark, so that we can catch them before their day might get absolutely crazy or out of hand, as well as in the afternoon, so a little bit after the 4 to 7 p.m. mark. That's when we have our recruiting team send out some emails, hop on some phone calls and engage with these professionals. And after making that switch, once the pandemic had kind of taken a full effect, we saw a much greater level of traction. But of course, our ability to reach that audience was impacted because naturally healthcare professionals had a lot of time embedded into more important things. So hopefully that gives a little bit of context to how we've been kind of successfully going after these healthcare professionals. But truly there's no key answer there. But I hope it does get better as, hopefully everyone's coming out of lockdown.
Yeah, just to chime in there, William, I did 2 projects for Robin this year. One was around OAB, and that was with obviously patients, but also with senior practitioners around that. And then I did another study around high-end cranial and spinal equipment, so the imaging, the navigation, and the robotics around that. So that was all recruited via Ivy. So and they went pretty smooth, and they were very senior surgeons on that last project that we were talking to with over 10, 15 years experience. So
yeah,
and
I think that we just wrapped up.
Online? Sorry, I'm just coming in there. Did you actually talk to them when you did the interviews or the engagement? Did you talk to them online? And was that okay?
yeah, they were Teams or Zoom interviews. Yeah, was no problem. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a great use case scenario. I appreciate you bringing that up, Jeff, because I think that spinal one is a project that we recently finished up. But looking through it, I can almost guarantee we probably added an extra week or 2 in terms of our recruitment timeline, which generally we pride ourselves on getting recruitments done quickly, but specifically for sort of these niche healthcare recruits, especially during the time of a pandemic, we like to just set those expectations up front with the end client, right? Nobody wants to have an end client breathing down their neck, so we try and plan accordingly.
Any more questions? I've just got one, just very quickly, which is about how you recruit members into your organisation in the first place. So do you actively go out and try and seek them? How do you go about attracting them?
Yeah, so the best way to think of Ivy Exec is sort of like a niche version of LinkedIn, or LinkedIn with a twist. And because we have a core foundation of offering these career advancement services, generally we've gotten a lot of our members in the very beginning stages of building our community from partnerships that we have with executive MBA programs and MBA programs, those of which are the top in the world. So we make partnerships with those programs in order to advertise and market, how they're able to help continually progress our members in their industry, in their career paths, as well as, some of the more traditional things that I know Nick mentioned during the presentation. The reason why these folks are coming to Ivy Exec not only are through those partnerships that we have with higher education institutions and the MBA programs themselves, but naturally, once you have enough of these professionals within your community, they start to talk. If you have a good product and they really like the career coach they talked with, or that resume critiquing session that helped them land, the next level of their job, we've seen a huge amount of increase in interest just from word of mouth. Some of the high C-level executives that give mentorships or provide mentorships to our members, or even put on webinars. We had the CFO of Ferrari who put on a webinar. I am not in the car industry, clearly, but it's those kind of really engaging and kind of industry leading conversations that we advertise, of course, on the more traditional networks like LinkedIn. And that's what draws our members to Ivy Exec. But in full transparency, we don't accept every member. About 40 to 50% of the members who apply to be a part of Ivy Exec are rejected. And that's mainly because we really want to keep that high quality in mind, making sure that 80% of our members are director level and above. And so they are the decision makers. And this was all done naturally from the beginning, which is really my favorite unique part about Ivy Exec and how we transitioned into the market insight space. It was actually a major market research firm who reached out to our co-founder, Alex, who you see here on the top row on the left side. And they said, hey, I was doing some fiddling around online. I came across Ivy Exec. Seems like you guys have a massive, community of, at the time, I think, not even but 500,000 of these individuals within our membership. Like, how much would you charge us, for a 60-minute IDI to go after these VP level folks in this industry? And I think Alex was a bit confused. He goes, what do you mean how much we would charge? And that is when the light bulb went off. And so it really speaks to the natural and organic transition we had into leveraging our membership. who again aren't traditionally a part of a panel or an expert network that was founded on the expectation that these folks and their members would participate in market research.
Thank you. Okay, so if there aren't any more questions, thank you very much, William and Nick, and for everybody for attending today. And as I said, I will circulate the recording with William's contact details as well, should you have any further questions. But thank you so much. That was really, really useful.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for letting us finish again.
It's breakfast for you, isn't it? Lunchtime for us.
Absolutely. Well, since Nick and I messed up the timing a little bit this morning, yeah, I think we're going to go off and have some breakfast and then hop on another team call here in about 15 minutes. So we're going to get our day started, and I hope you guys don't work too late tonight, but thank you again for the opportunity.
Thank you. And thank you, Jeff and Nick, for chipping in. Bye, everyone.
Bye.